Hello everyone and welcome to the program. It's Sunday Politics right here on Channels Television. I'm Sheung Okimbale. What a week it has been, from stories coming from London, the capital of the United Kingdom of England, to the ever intriguing and dramatic political scene in Nigeria. We're following all the stories for you. Let's give you some updates on the PDP congresses across the nation as the party looks ahead to the May 21st National Convention. The PDP is rounding up its congresses as they prepare for the National Convention, which is scheduled, of course, for Saturday, 21st May 2016. But it looks like trouble may be looming. Legally speaking, of course, the PDP said it will not hold the Southwest Zone Congress because of the court order by one of its members, but the Congress held in Akure, the capital of Ondo State. That's perhaps setting the stage for a possible legal tussle. But one of the party's chieftains has been advising the party on the way to go to avoid any future disaster. Professor Jerry Ghana at the forum last week in Abuja seems to be talking as a party's conscience now. Let's take a listen to him.
The bedrock of our democracy in the PDP is power to the people. Let the people choose their leaders in free, fair, and credible elections. We hate any manipulation and rigging of elections in any form. If the PDP is to be revived and remobilized for electoral victory by the grace of God, we must return to these wonderful principles of power to the people. We received painful reports of the poor and shamelessly undemocratic practices during the recently concluded party congresses in several states. After the shocking results of the last general election in 2015, we had hoped that our leaders would have learned the serious lessons to make them resolve never again to impose candidates, never again to practice impunity, never again to rig party elections, never again to take the people for granted. And yet, we find ourselves, in our very eyes, returning to even worse things within our party. I put it to you that if we are sincere and did the right thing to do for the northern states of our party, the 3 zones, by the grace of God, to produce the next presidential candidate of our party, then now leaders that are sincere and straight and men and women of honor should insist that the South should produce the next national chairman of our party.
Well, that's Professor Jerry Ghana, a former Minister of Information, talking to some members of the party. It looks so much like the party is looking to rebuilding and re-strategizing for 2019. The debate over where the chairman of the party should come from at the National Convention seems to still be going on. But up next, when we return from this break, we'll be talking about President Muhammadu Buhari's anti-corruption fight. It took the debate to the global scene in London at a summit. We're talking to a former chairman of the National Human Rights Commission, Professor Chidi Odinkalu. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for staying with us wherever you are watching. This is Sunday Politics on Channels Television, and you can follow the conversation right here. You know the right handles to follow at CTV Politics, or send an email to us, politicstoday@channelstv.com. Let's get the conversation started, shall we? You remember what President Muhammadu Buhari said when he was asked, what would you like to be remembered for? He said he wants to be remembered as a president who fought corruption to his knees. He took the conversation to London when he was invited to speak alongside some other leaders of other nations as it talking about the global strategy to fighting corruption. Joining us from our Abuja studio to discuss this issue is the former chairman of the National Human Rights Commission, Professor Chidi Odinkalu. Many thanks for coming on the program, Professor Odinkalu.
Thank you very much, Shem, for having me. Good evening.
Thank you so much. Let's start the conversation by looking at it will be 1 year in a matter of days that President Muhammadu Buhari has been in office. And one of the spine of his programs as a president, some of the things that he said on the 29th of May 2015 was the intention and the plans to fight corruption hard. But if you look at it on the whole, do you see him doing that?
I think it's fair to say that the President Buhari has brought some credibility, personal credibility, to the fight against corruption, and that he's shown a will to confront it, and that is a positive thing. I think he deserves credit, even by those who don't necessarily have to agree with him. I think everybody who wishes Nigeria well must agree that corruption and impunity for corruption have done Nigeria tremendous damage, and that this president has shown a will to try and confront that. And for me, I think Nigerians should support that, and friends of Nigeria should welcome that.
Oh, interesting. There's a will, the political will and the intentions, one thing on one side, and the reality on the ground is on another side. But if you weigh it side by side with the anti-corruption mechanisms that are put in place, do you see that working? Practically speaking, of course.
Now, you see, we've got to take this in slices. The first question is there a will? And my view on the balance is there is a will, which deserves to be supported. That does not mean that the fight against corruption is all of a sudden going to be perfect. The president is only one person, and he is not going to fight corruption by himself. As a matter of fact, my view has always been that the most a president can do is provide leadership, and that you are not going to be able to fight corruption unless you have strong institutions and strong processes underpinned by proper laws to do that. This means that you're going to have to rely on existing institutions: the police, the EFCC, the ICPC, the infrastructure of law enforcement, the prosecutorial departments of the various attorneys general's offices. Now, and of course the judiciary. Now, all of these are not perfect institutions. They're run by Nigerians, and Nigerians, by and large, are good people, but now and again you also find not so good people in these institutions. So providing leadership means accepting that these institutions themselves have to go through some processes of renewal, of learning to do things differently, of learning to reprofessionalize and refocus, and it's going to take time. My hope is that renewing these institutions is part of the package of measures, but I don't question at all whether or not there is the political will. I think there is.
Interesting. One will look at the fact that when the likes of Vice President Professor Osinbajo was coming into office, a lot of people were talking about reforms in Nigeria's judiciary system, and some of the people said, look, his antecedent as a former Commissioner for Justice and Attorney General of Lagos, and the kind of reforms that we saw happen. Aside 2015, the act signed by President Goodluck Jonathan on the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, and one will be wondering, what else do you think has taken shape in fighting corruption in the system in Nigeria since the duo of President Buhari and Professor Osinbajo took charge of the country?
Look, I think it's important to recognize that you cannot fight corruption without personal integrity and without personal credibility. And I think that the vice president brings exceptional personal integrity to the table on the issue of corruption, and he's shown that he's willing to continue along the lines that he worked prior to becoming vice president. The current president himself has, at least on the question of corruption, shown integrity and will. I have to say I did disagree and continue to disagree with the way in which their assets declaration was managed. I don't think they have kept faith with their campaign promise to publish their assets, and I do think that it is necessary in order to fight corruption effectively to make sure that the assets of all senior public officers are visited with the oxygen of transparency. I don't think they have kept faith with that, so I'm fairly clear about that. But look, we're not looking at perfection. We are looking at incremental progress. Has there been incremental progress? In my view, yes, there has been incremental progress. Is it necessarily sufficient for me right now? No, it isn't. But is that progress? Absolutely, there is progress. And that's all I ask for as a Nigerian. And I think what our people are asking for is not perfection. We're not asking for angels. We are saying, can we continue to make progress and build on progress? That's, for me, what's important. I still do expect, now that the Code of Conduct Bureau has said that they have fully verified the president's and vice president's assets, I would expect them to keep faith with their promise to release those assets to Nigerians. And not just stop there, require every other senior public officer in the country to do so. So that we know we are sustaining progress. And so that the kinds of things we have, where a former senior officer is being charged in 2016 for assets declaration that took place in 2003 to 2004 will not happen again. We have prompt implementation and prompt enforcement where there has been a suspicion of failure to comply with the required laws. I think that's the way to go.